I want to welcome everyone to our 14th episode. Super excited. We have a special guest this week talking on the topic of frientimacy. David and Chip will introduce her in a moment. And I think the topic is so fitting right now, too, considering this blend of friendship and intimacy. And there's this crossover. How do you achieve both friendship and intimacy when you have a mask, you're at a distance, you're not engaging in ways you used to? So I think this is going to be a super exciting topic tonight. So I'm going to hand it over. We have different backgrounds with Chip and David again. So I'm going to kick it off to you guys and explain.
Okay, explain.
Explain. Where are you?
Mansplain. I'm in a different bedroom at home here in Baja. Why don't we have people in the chat tell us where you're calling in from, or just tell us where you're calling in from, including if you want the intimate details of which part of your home you're in. If you're at home, I'm in a bedroom, and I have a heart right up here with wings, and yeah, that's where I am, and I'm in Baja. David.
I'm in Park City, and because I try to look professional, I put this up, but that's actually the bottom of a bed. And I'm in this sort of like weird condo that has like weird stuff. I've got like little stuffed animals and stuff around here. So that you don't think I'm completely insane, I put this paper back here.
Okay. Oh, you can do a green screen. Do you like green screens?
I find that whole thing kind of like it doesn't work for me. I don't like it. No.
You have the scalp for it. Because
well, thank you, sir.
I sort of do too. But I mean, the thing is, with the green screen, if you actually have anything that's a little bit errant, like a finger or sometimes hair, you get all that weird distortion thing going on, and you would have no distortion around your head. You'd probably just have a halo. I think David should have a halo around his head, don't you think? Yes.
I love that idea.
A halo?
Yeah.
Okay.
An aura.
Good. So since our last experience hanging out together 2 weeks ago, what's been going on in your life?
Well, I'm still, hiding out here in Park City because I see no reason to leave. Apropos of our Shasta, our guest today, we've been doing these studies for clients, and so there's this like so I'll tell you a little thing about. I'm not supposed to tell too much about this, but so we did this study, right? This big quant study, and we like, what's going on with people? And they were like, things are sort of okay. And then we went back, and I said, this is not right. They're lying to us. I'd never done where they lied to us, but I think they were lying to us. So we went back and we did this qual interviews where I would like talk to people, and so this is how it would go, Chip. I'd say, so how you doing? Oh, we're great. Okay, so, and we talk a little bit, and then like 5 minutes into it, I say, so tell me about your day. And they're spending like an hour or two a day in stress management of some kind. So I said, why are you doing that? And they're like, oh, I'm stressed out of my mind. Oh my God, it's horrible. So a lot of that, so much of it is from loneliness, from isolation. So very excited about our guest today.
Well, maybe we'll go straight to her in a moment. I mean, maybe we should just go straight there. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I think it's worth going straight to Shasta because she's got a lot to talk about, and we are thrilled to have her. And David's going to introduce her, and it was his idea to bring her on because his wife loves Shasta, is a big fan, and now you're all going to become fans too. Go ahead, David.
So please welcome our special guest, Shasta Nelson, and she's a leading expert in something called frientimacy, which is a movement she created to describe the act of creating healthier and more fulfilling relationships in our lives. Shasta is the creator of a global community, a keynote speaker, and author. Her 3 relationships requirements have been featured in her TEDx talk and are widely praised for helping break down relationships in ways everyone understands. Facebook selected her to be their media spokesperson and friendship expert for Friends Day 2018, and she's appeared on several live television shows and countless national magazines. Her research and wisdom can be found in her 3 books, Friendships Don't Just Happen, Frientimacy, How to Deepen Friendships for Lifelong Health and Happiness, and her latest, The Business of Friendship, Making the Most of Relationships Where We Spend Most of Our Time. Hey, Shasta.
Hi, thank you for having me. Super fun to be here with
Oh,
all of you.
So
wow.
I,
Take it away.
tell me, like, frientimacy. What's that?
Okay, so for a long time, I was on a campaign of saying we need more intimacy in our lives than romance. But every time I said the word intimacy, people's brains like went back to sixth grade, and everybody just thought, is she saying we need more sex, like with just friends? And I mean, it was like synonymous sex and intimacy. And I was like on a campaign to like, I'm going to change the word. And finally, a couple years in, I was like, okay, I'm just going to coin a new word. So we open a new folder in our head that reminds us all that we need more intimacy than just a romantic relationship. And we sometimes only use that word in romance, and especially for guys. We have often even more so reserved intimacy only for our romantic relationships. And all of us, it's a human need, and we need more of it than one person can provide. So, frientimacy, it is.
One of my friends, Vanda, coined, and I'm sure she got it from someone else. She said, intimacy is about in, to, me, see. That means intimacy means you can see inside of me. That's really scary. How do you help people, especially men, to actually open themselves up such that people can see inside of them, and whether that is a dark or angry or shameful place?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we all are scared of it to a large degree. And I think that's in part because we know how much it matters. Like I was one of the researchers that I quoted in my last book. He does research on neuroscience. And he was saying, when you actually are really able to study the brain, as we are in the last 10 years with neuroscience and MRI scans and all this kind of stuff, and hooking people up and seeing what parts of the brain light up, he said Maslow had it all wrong. He said relationships are actually the number one most core need in our lives. And you just take like a baby, for example, can't get any of the other needs met, shelter, food, any of those, without being in relationship. And every single one of us gets those needs met now by being in relationship. And those relationships are so, so core. We intrinsically know we're wired for it. And I think we're also super afraid of the rejection and the it's like this one of those things where it's like it's what we want the most, and yet we're scared to admit it and actually go for that. But I define healthy friendship or frientimacy as any relationship where we both feel seen in a safe and satisfying way. So similar to the into me you see, I don't know, for anybody who's ever had like any level of accolades or fame or people who just kind of say they like you and adore you or something, and you're just like, you don't even know me. Like it kind of falls empty, right? It's like we want to be loved, and yet if we don't actually feel like people know us, or even if it's somebody that we've been dating or with, but we feel like we haven't told them or shown ourselves, we want so badly to be loved, but it doesn't feel as fulfilling if we don't actually feel like they know us. And so it's a conundrum, because we want desperately to be known, and yet we're also so scared of being rejected on the other side of it for some reason, and so it makes us scared and we pull back. It's
So what do
partly
you
just
do?
admitting we need it.
So what
You
do you
just do
do?
it
So what do you?
anyway.
Oh, yeah. Any
If we
tips
want,
though? Like
yeah.
tactical tips?
Yeah. If we want to jump right in, I teach I teach the requirements. David mentioned the 3 requirements of relationship, and we can just throw those out there because they do help create so much of the context for the conversations. So when I was researching my book, Frientimacy, I was studying, like, Google's over here researching what makes for a healthy team and calling it psychological safety. And this group's over here studying trust. And this group's over here studying healthy marriage. And these researchers are studying like why do I call this person my best friend and not this person? And what are the things we need in a friendship? And as somebody who follows all the research, I was like, oh my word, like we're all using different words, we're all studying different things. And that was when my brain just starts compiling it all and trying to group together. And these are the 3 requirements that just showed up in every single study with different words, of course, but these are the 3 things. One is vulnerability, the one we were just kind of mentioning. It's the desire to be seen, to share, to feel gotten, like we can share whoever we are with each other and be authentic. The other 2 requirements are super important in conjunction with that, and that's how we do vulnerability safely. And that is the other two requirements are positivity and consistency. So I teach them on a triangle, and the base of the triangle is positivity. That's where all relationships start. And I won't get in the weeds here and do a whole keynote, but every relationship starts at the bottom on a foundation of positive emotions. Like every single one of us wants a reward. We want it to feel good. We want to enjoy it. We want to laugh. We want to feel loved. We want to feel inspired, like all the pleasant feelings. We want all of them. And we want them in our relationships. And when they don't have that, we're going to be less likely to want to share with people and be vulnerable. And we're going to be less likely to want to be consistent and spend time. So all three feed each other. When we have a good time, we then need to repeat it. If we just all got together tonight and had a good time, that's great. It's a good time. If we actually want to build a relationship, we have to repeat that over and over and over. And as we repeat that and spend time together, we get to know each other better. So for all of you who are joining us tonight, for many of you have been joining, this is episode 14, and you've been consistent and you've shown up, and every time you show up, you get to know David and Chip a little bit better. And so you're getting to know who they are. So the consistency has brought vulnerability where you're actually getting a sense of them. You enjoy it and you want to come back again. And so you see these three things happening. It's what creates community. It's what creates a healthy marriage. It's what you need on a team. And it's why we feel closer to some people is the people we feel closest to. We've practiced these three things so much, so frequently that we've moved up the triangle with all of them. So in short, we can practice vulnerability incrementally and slowly in conjunction with when it feels good and we get a positive response for that, whether it's empathy or validation or laughter. And we practice it in consistent ways. The more we spend time with you, the more we should be getting to know you. So that was a lot. That was like everything in like 2 minutes. So we won't stay that deep, but yeah, does that make sense?
So
Yes.
I think I want something more tactical. So,
Okay.
so after the show tonight, I'm going to go over and see my best friend who lives like a couple miles from here and pick up my mail and say hi, see what you're doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now I want more intimacy with my buddy. What do I do?
Awesome. Well, so you're setting up the interaction. That's often the hardest part. You're going over there. So that's awesome. And now you're looking to do the two other things. So vulnerability. So the more you can have a conversation and each share something. So my favorite thing that I do with almost everybody in my life in some context is just let's each share a highlight and a low light while we're together. And so it can look different and I can bring it up casually or be more structured with it. But basically it's like, hey, tell me something that's like you're really excited about in life right now, that's going really well, that you're proud of, that's feeling like a success. And what's going on that's like a stressor or something I can support you around or something that's just annoying or frustrating that's happened. And so I set it up where with any of my friends, like, hey, over lunch, let's make sure we both share this. And so that allows all of us, any of us who are together to do that, to you were naming, Chip, I think the vulnerability, we often think of all these negative emotions with anger and fear and shame and insecurity. And that's a part of vulnerability for sure. But I've actually found that most of us have a harder time expressing pride and celebration and expressing that what's going well in our lives. That's almost more vulnerable. And so it's really important. Like when I'm with my friends, I want to be like, what are you celebrating? What are you proud of? And to be able, like, we want to be seen for both and for all. So the more we can have conversations that allow both people to do that, that's what you'd be aiming for with your friend tonight.
David, could you do that tonight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, I've known my buddy for 35 years. And so I just, yeah.
That's right. Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't use the same language that Shasta's.
Sure.
I can't go up and so we're going to do this thing and you're going to tell me this and that, and then we're going to be closer buddies. No. But yeah, I mean, that's right.
That's what you're going for. Yeah, that's what you want to go for, because I think sometimes, like, I don't know if any of you have had the experience. I meet a friend for lunch and you can even leave that lunch and they ask a whole bunch of questions. They even can ask a whole bunch of questions but they can be like, hey, I saw on Facebook that you were on such and such a vacation and how's the book coming along and da da da. And we can be talking and they can even be interested and I can be sharing and vice versa. But I leave the lunch and I'm like, I didn't tell them about this thing, but that's actually what's coming up for me. That's actually what's present in my life today. So I love questions that are kind of open-ended and letting that person share what is most important to you to share. Like Chip at the top before we came on, you're like, what's juicy for you right now? Like that's a great way to do it because it lets the other person choose what they want to share, like what matters most to them, as opposed to us assuming that we know what matters most to them. And so open-ended questions, highlighting kind of the good stuff, the negative stuff, like holding the space for all of that. That's what we all want more of, is just being seen.
So let's go back to what's juicy for you, which you said was loneliness. So let's talk about that. There are actually, a lot of people don't know that in the UK, they actually have a minister of loneliness, which shows that we have a bit of an epidemic. And during COVID times, even worse. So talk to us about loneliness, and then talk to us about loneliness during COVID times.
Yeah, it sounds so funny to say that's what's juicy for me. But one of the things I've loved about the pandemic, that I've appreciated, that has emerged from this, is there's a lot less stigma around loneliness. I have been on a campaign for like 12 years trying to reclaim that that's not a negative word. It's a healthy human emotion. It's our body's way of giving us a message that we have room for more love and connection. So it's the same thing when we study like, if our body, lights up the same center in our brain as if I'm hungry, my body tells me I'm hungry. And there shouldn't be shame in that. Like, that's my body needing food. Or if I'm tired, that's my body needing sleep. I don't need to be like embarrassed that I need sleep. That's a human need. And loneliness is a message our body's telling us that we have more capacity for love and support in our lives. And unfortunately, so many of us don't want to be lonely, or we don't know what it is. And so we think, I can't be lonely, I have friends. Or I can't be lonely, I'm busy all the time. Or I can't be lonely, I actually wish I had a night off. I wish I could shut the bathroom door and have people gone. And you can be lonely and all of those other things be true. Like, loneliness is the question of how loved and supported do you feel in your life right now? And, I often think of it as a scale of 1 to 10. And if 10 were the most fulfilled, the most connected, the most supported, it's a really healthy question for all of us to ask on a regular basis, and to say, what number would I give myself right now on a scale of 1 to 10? And that's the gap there, is the loneliness. And so it's a really important thing for us to be talking about. Emotional intelligence says that we have to be able to do 2 things. It's name the accurate emotion, and then once we know the emotion, we can do something about it. But if we call it boredom, or if we call it hunger, then we're less likely to like do what we need to do to actually get those relationship needs met. So for me, watching this pandemic and having people not feel as embarrassed to say, I'm isolated, I feel lonely. Like, we've actually 61% of us felt lonely, but the numbers came out in January before COVID. 61% of us felt lonely on a regular basis. So this is not a COVID thing. COVID is helping remove some of the stigma from it and helping us have more national conversations. And that's what's juicy for me.
This is so interesting. The idea of normalizing the idea of loneliness and putting in the same category is I'm hungry. And how I remember seeing something I read about, I guess what we call toxic loneliness. So the health effects of long-term loneliness are severe. Right? So
yes. I was gonna say, just to put some statistics to that, to feel chronically lonely, meaning that we feel it and we're not getting the need met. Because hunger is not a bad thing. Not getting the need met is a bad thing, right? So just being hungry is the bad thing. Being tired is not a bad thing. If we don't know how to get the need met or can't fall asleep, that's where it becomes damaging. So loneliness isn't bad. It's not getting the need met that's bad. And it's so bad that it's the equivalent damage on our bodies as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's twice as harmful as being obese, and it does the equivalent damage on our bodies as being a lifelong alcoholic. So it's worse than not exercising. There's nothing you can eat or not eat that will make you healthier than if you have friendships. So yeah, it's to not have that need met is putting your body in more stress than anything else you can do.
So why
go on? Sorry, I just wanted to give you some stats.
I'm sorry, but I mean, I'm going to riff on that for a second and then go back to Tim. So why is it not a public health crisis, or given the attention that, say, it's being given in the UK with a minister of loneliness?
I would say it's the #1 public health issue. And I think there's doctors coming on record and saying that now. We've got Dr. Vivek Murthy, who is the former US Surgeon General, who just came out with a book on it. He's been a great champion of this topic. And I think it's starting to be said. I think it just feels nebulous to some of us, and it feels, like friendship. It kind of used to drive me crazy because people treat it like this fluffy subject. And I was like, This is not pom-poms and girls night out and guys going golfing. Like, this is human relationships. This is like the deep stuff. This is like what we're made for. So it feels really substantial to me, but I think we got to teach and we got to train and we've got to like remind people and define it. So I love that you guys are talking about it here.
I think the reason that America doesn't deal with the subject is because of the L word. It means you're a loser, not loneliness. Loneliness, and this is not a country that deals well with losers and does not deal well with people acknowledging something isn't going well. And so if you're lonely, it actually makes you feel like you're a loser. And people can tell that you're a terrible surfer or a bad poet or you can't carry a tune, but they don't necessarily know that you're lonely. So they fake it. And they fake it because it means that they're a winner. And the worst faking it that happens is in marriages. And I'm not going to get to that kind of faking it. I'm talking about the worst experience of your life is to be in a relationship and feel lonely. Do you want to talk about that? And David, I just took over again. I'm so sorry.
I'll answer this and then it's back to you, David. No, absolutely. Because as long as we're single, we hold the hope that we can find this, right? But we feel, a lot of people, it's easy to feel trapped if we are in relationship and still feel lonely. And it reminds us that it's not just the finding of somebody. Like, I think that's one of the things that really spurred me on this, 12 years ago, was that everybody's so obsessed with the romantic relationships and the parent-child relationships. Like, they get pregnant and they go buy just 1,000 books on the subject, and they're going to go find the one and they'll like pay any amount of money. And it's like we've gotten so caught up in our culture that those are the relationships that like give us an identity. And those are not the relationships that actually make the biggest difference to our health and to our happiness. It's the quantity of all these other relationships, and they really, really matter. And I think we often just think that if we're just chosen, or if we just find a best friend, or if we find a spouse, find a partner, that it will take away the loneliness. And that loneliness is needing to be seen. And remember, it's feeling seen in a safe and supportive way. And so we can be in a crowd and be lonely. We can be out with friends and be lonely. We can be married and be lonely. And it is a whole nother tragedy on itself when you have that experience, when you actually wanted that experience to lead to a certain emotion. And the emotion doesn't just come from signing a contract. The emotion doesn't come from just pinky promising ourselves. The emotion only comes when we practice vulnerability, consistency, and positivity. So if you're in a relationship that's not practicing those three things at the highest level, you're going to have a lot of space there for loneliness. Back to you, David.
Well, I'm going to take a contrary position here.
Do it.
So
I dare you to. Good luck.
Well, I think that we do a lot of studies here, and we talk to a lot of people, as does Chip. And I think that the parent-child emphasis or the spouse emphasis seems less with at least the people I talk to, that they're much like they have a pod, right? Which I think is actually a thing during COVID, right? You have like a pod.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many people I know, like Alex Von Bitter with his Mankind Project, where they, it's like a pod of guys, and it's very much what you're talking about, that sort of thing. And, with women who are increasingly moving together, not necessarily in the same house, but like houses together, so that then they can be near each other to support each other as they get older. And I see more and more of this sort of thing. And I'm, as you were talking, what struck me was that this idea, these emphasis on these two other kinds of relationships, were sort of a bit of a fantasy built in your 20s.
Yeah,
I would agree with you. That's not contrary, and I would agree with you.
I mean, what do you think, Chip? Is it like as we get older, do we make our own thing and we kind of get away from those relationships?
I want to hear why Shasta agrees with you first.
Well, I do agree that as we get older, we start realizing that we need more than one person. I think that starts becoming more obvious. I think as we get older, we also, a lot of women are getting out of marriages or being widowed later in life and just being like, that was a lot of work, right? And being married for women, historically, these numbers are changing too, but historically, being married actually damaged our health, and we tended to be more married women are on antidepressants than unmarried women. So we think we're going to be happy and healthy when we get in those marriages, and it's there's that marriage balance and equality still that's shifting, but still, yeah, to your point. So I've read a lot of those stories too, where people are later in life just being like, I just want love and support and relationships without some of the stuff that comes with marriage. And I think we just are getting wiser about what we need in our lives, and knowing that different people feed us in different ways, you know. But I will say, I don't want to foster the belief that as you get older, you have more an established pod, because research is showing that we are replacing half our close friends almost on average every 7 years, and that's actually going all the way through our lives. And so there isn't an age where we like should have our friends and that something's wrong with us if we don't. It's fabulous if there's some relationships that you continue on. And so when I say half your friends, yeah, I encourage you to think of like, who are the 3 to 5 people you would say you're closest to right now, that you're confiding in, that you're regularly present in their lives. And chances are high that 2 or 3 of those were people that were different 7 years ago, you know. And so as you kind of start seeing like there is a revolving door there, I think it is important to realize that as we age, we move to be close to our kids and our grandkids. We change, we stop working, and that's been a social place. There's a lot of reasons why even later in life we might be finding ourselves in a place where we don't have that pod completely established, and where we have to keep always making friends. So I love that you're interviewing people that are doing that and finding that, and that makes my heart very happy. And I'm not arguing against that. And I don't think that's everybody's experience.
I want to say that these people are not the norm.
Yeah.
This is like,
but it's a good vision. I love it.
Yeah, that there's like an epidemic, like it's much harder to stay connected, because as you said, you kind of things get smaller. So as you get older, you really got to put an effort into doing this. Yeah.
So one of the things we've learned at the Modern Elder Academy at MEA, having had 750 people from 24 countries come through, all kinds of people, people who are introverts, extroverts, doctors, firemen, etc., is the thirst for intimacy is enormous, but people don't know it. It's like an unrecognized need. And there's this sense of the bonding that happens over the course of the week that people are sort of surprised by. It's almost like, as people sometimes say, it's like going to summer camp and having a collection of friends that you know you're going to be your friends for the rest of your life, because there was some vulnerable opportunity to connect on a deeper level. And so I think one of the questions I have is, if you were president of the United States, Shasta, because you're running, right, as a peace and freedom candidate, how would you change the United States from a public policy or social policy basis to make it more to actually value social capital, not in the sort of way of who's the best, but more in the way of valuing the sociability and the conviviality of a culture that often is very individualistic?
Yeah. It's a really beautiful question. And yeah, I would love to be on a task force where we're brainstorming those kinds of things. I don't know that you can't mandate intimacy. You can't mandate closeness.
I have been in relationships with people who tried to mandate intimacy with me, and it was like, leave me alone, or I'll find someone else who does.
Yeah, I mean, you can put a policy that says no smoking in this restaurant, but you can't put a policy together that says make a friend in this restaurant. Like it's a harder thing to create. What I would do absolutely is, so to me, when I see that the numbers are as high as they are for loneliness, and this is true of Australia and the UK and the United States and many other countries in Europe, when I see these numbers, I say, this is not an individual problem. This is why we need to stop feeling shame around this. This is not me not having social skills. I can have the most amazing social skills. It's not about a personality, about being introvert or extrovert. It's not loser at all. It's me just simply, when you see these kinds of numbers, and this is kind of what really prompted me to write my most recent book on the workplace relationships, because my first two books, the first one is how to make friends as an adult concept, and the second one is like how to go deeper and like make intimacy in those relationships. And I had this epiphany on the airplane a few years ago where I was like, I have enough resources out there for the individual. At some point, we've got to change the way we live as a society. This is a systemic problem. This is a collective problem. And if I were a leader in a position, I would be saying, what are we teaching at the curriculum and education systems that are teaching healthy relationships? And I'd be looking at that. I'd be saying, how can we do healthcare differently? How can I put together and incentivize our hospitals to be paying attention to the social needs and putting in services to help take care of patients and help them to repair and recover faster? I'd be looking at our companies and our organizations and how can I help look at the research. The research is so compelling that if your employees have a best friend at work, they are your best employee. They are more engaged. They treat your customers better. It's just a better business. I'd be teaching and training. I'd be out there like on the campaign trail, always talking about what we need to be doing, because we need to be working differently, not valuing productivity as the highest value, that we're burning people out and leaving them completely exhausted at the end of their workday, where they feel like they have no energy to jump on a video call with a friend because they're exhausted. I mean, the way we're doing our systems are wrong. So I would be doing whatever I could to be incentivizing, teaching, trying to look at how we do politics differently. I don't know. Every system would improve. I guarantee it. Religion would improve. Like every system would improve if we taught healthy relationships.
Can we write you in?
Yeah, good luck. You might be the only person voting.
No, actually, please, no write-ins this year. You know what I'm talking about. You don't need write-ins. David, maybe we do one more question from you, and then let's open it up to and give a little bit more time to our audience tonight. So if you have questions, go ahead and start putting them in chat if you haven't done so already, just so you have an opportunity to give a whack at, I don't know, throw a softball to Shasta.
I was gonna say, what are you saying? Having them whack me?
I don't know what I was saying, to be honest with you. I was like, I'm just a wackadoodle tonight. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. David.
Yeah, long day. I got that. So tell me some success stories. Give me some examples of somebody who was like, sort of like, oh, I'm here and now I'm here. Yeah.
Well, one of the ones that popped in my mind earlier when you were talking about how much we want this, so many of people craving this, historically, when I go on book tour, it's usually more women in the audience than men. We have often treated friendship like a women's issue, which drives me crazy. But in one particular situation, I was at a book signing and it was all women in the audience. And there was one gentleman and he was standing in the book aisle, and you could tell he was attending and he was like looking at me, but anytime I'd like actually make eye contact with him, he'd quickly look down at the books again. And he was like the whole time paying attention, but didn't want to be seen as attending. And he waited till I'd signed every book and hugged every woman and they all left. And he came up to me and said, "Can I talk to you?" And I was like, "You have earned the right to talk to me. Yes, you absolutely can." And it was really interesting what he said, because he was like, I guess and he just kind of, and stop. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if I have good friends. Of course I have good friends. I mean, they would just die if they heard me saying this. And he was like having this monologue conversation with him. And I was like trying to figure out like, what is the question? And he basically was sharing with me what so many of us feel. And that is, he was saying, I play, he goes, "I have better friends than most any other person I know, most, especially guys." And he said, "I play poker with the same group of guys every, first Friday of every month." And he's like, "And I go golfing with the same foursome on a regular basis. I'm still in touch with my high school buddies." And he's like going down the list, convincing him that he's got good friends. And I was like, "So what's the problem?" And he's just like, like 2 months ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer and I don't know who to talk to about this. I just wish any one of them would just take me out the way women do," he said, "and just like have I just want to talk. I just want to, but I can't bring that up at poker. They're there to blow off steam, and I can't bring it up on the golf course, in between the hits." And he was just having this huge moment where he has all these good friends. And if I had asked him 3 months ago, he would have told me he had the best friends. But here's a moment in his life where he doesn't feel like he has the practice in the background of like having those conversations. And so that's a good example of somebody who had the positivity. They always had a good time. They're playing games, they're doing activities, and they do it regularly. So they've got the positivity and the consistency, but they haven't practiced practice the vulnerability. And so he and I had an amazing conversation. He promised, I said, you know, most of your guy friends would probably be more than happy. Like if you actually said to them, I would love to talk about this, what do you think they'd say? And he's like, oh, I know Bob would. I don't even know why. I'm like, but it's just, it's so awkward. And I said, of course it's awkward because this is a muscle that is not practiced. And it's a new way of being in your relationship. And that makes total sense to me. And he went and had these conversations. And this is not like some big where I did anything amazing. But he followed up with an email and was just like, had these amazing, where his relationship just went so much deeper because he got to feel seen and showed up and practiced talking. And I think for so many of us, you know, that's all it takes. We know enough people. Like we are not lonely. Most of us are not lonely because we don't know enough people. We're lonely because we don't feel known by a few. Most of us are not lonely because we need to like have more interactions in our life. Most of us are interacted out. Most of us are lonely because we need more intimacy. And so we often, when we feel lonely, people come and say, I need to make new friends. And I was like, you probably don't need to make new friends. You probably just need to go deeper with some of the people you already are friends with. And so I think this is really the call to all of us, is to prioritize a few people in your life. Who are the people you wish you were closer to? And what is it, consistency, positivity, or vulnerability, that if you were to practice that would make the biggest difference?
One last thought before we pass it on to Laura to open up to questions from the audience is, you know, if you have a home or a car, you get insurance. You have a home as, you know, property and liability insurance, car insurance and liability insurance. We need emotional insurance. We need people to actually see that when you're having a rainy day or your life feels like a car wreck, that there is a collection of people that you have been investing in. You've been actually paying your insurance policy because those are the people who are going to be there for you. And we don't think of it that way. That sounds a little transactional, and I'm not meaning to be transactional, but in some ways you have to put it into that kind of metaphorical way of looking at it to realize, oh, you're right. I haven't really been investing in that emotional insurance I could use. So, well, let's take it to our friend Laura, who's going to open it up to questions or recite some of the questions.
Yeah. So thank you, Shasta. A question just came over about how do you talk about these 7-year cycles where maybe you kind of organically move through relationships, but how do you compassionately move on from friends who don't mesh with your values anymore? So, yeah.
Yeah, that happens frequently. So one of the really cool things about teaching the triangle is that every relationship starts on the bottom, and social researchers are saying now it takes about 200 hours, which seems a little high to me, but I care less about the numbers and I am more like the concept I'm behind. And that is that we are reporting it takes about 200 hours before we feel like somebody's our best friend. So before we get to the top of the triangle. So we need relationships all up and down that triangle. We need some people at the top of the triangle who absolutely, we have the highest level of vulnerability, the highest level of consistency, and the highest level of positivity with, but we also need relationships all up and down that. And so one of the really cool things is when we understand that relationship isn't all or nothing, or that these are my friends and no one else is, it reminds us that we can have many relationships kind of ebbing and flowing a little bit there. And so one of the amazing things, and this is kind of crazy in a political season to say, and the study is it has not been done in the last 4 years that I know of, but the studies show that we actually don't have to have worldview in common or any specific value or any political or religious commonalities to bond. That what we think we need to have in common is not the case. And most of us probably have had examples of people who were opposite of us that we could bond with. What matters is that we practice positivity and consistency and vulnerability. Usually when our values don't mesh or when we're upset about something politically, it's usually because it's stopping us from doing one of those 3 things. We don't feel seen, so we're not doing vulnerability, or we feel judged, or we feel frustrated at them and we feel judgmental. And so it's usually not the actual value or belief that's affecting us. It's that the way the 2 of us talk about it is affecting one of these 3 things. And so all that to say, when we find somebody who doesn't meshing with our values, one of the options we have is we don't have to necessarily end the relationship. We can decrease it, which means seeing them a little less frequently and sharing a little bit less, more, less vulnerably, and lowering our expectations of them in our lives. And it's okay to like let other relationships come in and be more meaningful at certain times. And all of our relationships ebb and flow. So that's the easy answer. I mean, we could certainly, I do a whole series, my most popular series on YouTube is definitely how to break up with friends. Unfortunately, that one wins over all of them, and how to recover from a breakup and being dropped by friends. All those ones always get the most hits. But so there's a lot there. So obviously, but I think in general, it's just important to remind ourselves we don't have to discard each other for the most part. We don't have to end things. We don't always have to just like turn something into there's people that I didn't have political value orientation with that we ended up talking about it and it wasn't easy, but we ended up finding a place where we were able to build our relationship to halfway up the triangle, and it does what it needs to do, and it's meaningful for what it is, and we know what to expect of each other. So I think it's possible that we don't have to end all those relationships.
Good answer. Everyone's always looking for closure. I think that's part of that struggle. From David Doyle, I love this one. How does workplace intimacy work between boss and employee, and probably even, your peers, et cetera? How do you create friendships in the workplace that remain professional and have boundaries so that you're not being taken advantage of in a number of different ways?
Yeah, it's a very big question. I just, not to sound salesy, but I just wrote an entire book on it. So that was, if you want the full answer, there's that one. In a nutshell, I think it's just realizing we are capable of doing more than one thing at a time. I mean, we get married or commit to somebody and we choose to have kids, and we do that knowing that we're going to have a divided, like we're going to try to protect this romantic relationship, and we're going to be parents now together, and we do it, and we know that there's going to be conflict, and we know that there's going to be sacrifice, but we know we can also do both things. And so I think it's we can do this, and I think the big thing is we're so afraid of drama in the workplace. We're so afraid. When I was doing all the surveys, people are so afraid of favoritism and gossip and like just so much fear. And I have to keep reminding people all those things. You can have a workplace that has a no friendship policy. I could go in there and we could make sure nobody's friends, and we could interview every single person and nobody has friends. And that's not going to protect the place from favoritism. It's not going to protect the place from gossip. It's not like those are not things to avoid. We don't avoid all the things we're afraid of by lessening our relationship to each other. If anything, I would argue the better relationships we have, the more we train, the more we say to our employees, we want you to belong. We want you to feel connected. We hope you find people who have your back. And tell stories from a leader's perspective. Here's what my friends have done for me in the workplace. The more we cast the vision and normalize it, the more we start training what makes a healthy relationship and have healthy expectations of it in the workplace, in my opinion, that will actually reduce all the things we're afraid of. It's not friendship that causes those things, it's the lack of healthy relationships that causes those things. And I have a whole chapter in the book on leadership specifically, because leaders are even lonelier than the average person, and CEOs and the C-suite is reporting high loneliness, and that is just not okay in my book. And so the way we're doing it right now to say, well, we don't want you to be too close to anybody, or we don't want you to have favoritism. What we're then saying is we're okay with our leaders leading from a lonely place. And we know that loneliness leads to less empathy. We know that loneliness leads to more fear. I want my leader, even if it's not with me, I want my leader to be as connected, as supported, and as loved as possible. So I have a whole, I really believe that we need to be okay with our leaders having friends, and we have to understand they can't be friends with every single person in the organization, but they need friends. And so I take a kind of a controversial stance on that, I guess, but to me, it just seems obvious. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my opinion.
No, great answer. And I think it's about boundaries and respect and all of those things in the workplace. Okay, so we have a question about, you mentioned Maslow earlier. You said something like Maslow was wrong and you were redefining the steps. Can you go back to that and explain what you were saying, why Maslow was wrong?
Yeah, so this is a neuroscientist, Matthew Lieberman, who has a book on how our brains are wired for relationship. And he talks about how we often think of shelter and food as like the basic human needs. And we often treat relationships like they're like a nice to have or a luxury at the top. And he says it's actually the opposite. Our brains are so wired for relationship that if we feel disconnected, it actually lights up the same part of our brain center as if we have been kicked in the stomach. It like the physical pain center gets lit up when we don't feel like we belong. We are so wired to belong to each other that we know that it's our survival and our support systems are there for that. So he actually said relationships are the most basic need we have before shelter and food. And he just says, as a baby, you can't even get those basic needs met without being in relationship. So even from the very beginning of humanity, you have to be in relationship to have your needs met. And pretty much all the way through our lives, we can look and see that I'm not providing my own food, my own shelter. I mean, it only happens because of other people in this world. And so it's our relationships to each other that really is the crux of our most basic human need. And it's beyond what we can do here tonight. But I mean, I can show you some of the studies of what it does to our bodies and our brains to not feel connected. It's so damaging. It's really the thing we need, that more than I love exercise and eating healthy. And the studies that show people who eat healthy and feel disconnected, and those who don't eat healthy and feel connected, it's like there's those 4 quadrants. And it won't surprise any of us that those who eat healthy and have healthy lifestyle habits and feel connected live longer and have the highest quality of life. But the second highest performing group is not those who have healthy lifestyle habits. It's those who have unhealthy lifestyle habits but feel connected. It just scores so importantly and so high. So this is we have not historically treated this as important as it is. Our health magazines are still acting like if we just learn to do the sit-up crunch in the right way, that was like the secret to our health. Or like if we just make the right smoothie and put the right ingredients in it, that's it. And I'm sure that can add to it, but the health magazines are not talking about the most important thing and our healthcare systems, and honestly yet. So we really have not been educated well on this subject. So sorry, I get on my soapbox. I have to just pull
You
back.
are so on your soapbox. I mean, come on, we're gonna take that soapbox away. And how do you talk so quickly? I mean, come on.
I have a lot to say.
You are do you drink coffee?
Well, in the mornings I do. But Chip
Okay.
and David, have you guys told everyone the story of your friendship and tell us how you practice consistency, vulnerability, and positivity?
We have, but not using those 3 words. But we have talked a little bit about how we originally met.
What's your consistency? How do you practice consistency?
Well, our consistency is this every 2 weeks. That's one thing. But we email each other and sort of just throw thoughts at each other. I will say that David, in terms of I appreciate that a few weeks ago I was having a rough day and I was doing doing the happy hour, feeling unhappy, and he checked in with me the next day just to make sure I was okay.
Oh,
So
that's good.
I appreciated that that sensitivity on his part, yeah. So.
Yeah, I think we have a funny relationship in that we hardly ever see each other except like this. I mean, it's like once every couple of years.
In person, yeah.
When there's something that, like if I have an issue that I know Chip can help me with, it's like, hey,
you reached out to me. Remember that you reached out to me. I won't go into the details. You reached out to me about someone who's was a family that was going through a really tragic situation.
Yeah.
And I don't recall why they wrote you. And then you sent it to me and said, "God, I don't know what to do with this, Chip." and so I'm sort of an armchair psychologist, and so I stepped in and to try to help. And it's good. I mean, I appreciate David's idealism. I love David's idealism about age. To me, I can sometimes be a little jaded on it, but I just love his idealism about how we are going to change this ageist society, and starting with ourselves. So let's go back to Laura and see if there are I have a question if there aren't other ones, but I want to get to audience questions first, though.
Yes, we have a question from, I love this name, Skip Press. Is that a made up name?
He's a porn star. That guy is a porn star.
Skip
Take him
Press.
off.
I know Chip. He's real.
Okay,
Vouch for Chip.
okay.
When COVID doesn't have people so freaked out about getting together, how will friendships change? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Like, what's gonna, are people just gonna bum rush each other? I mean, what's gonna happen? I
So
can't wait.
one of the things that I've really appreciated that I'm seeing happen is that a lot of relationships that were built around activities or events were forced, if they're going to survive, to learn how to share and connect and be based more around conversation. So we're seeing a lot more relationships go deeper, a lot more relationships being forced to just do a Zoom and talk, and whereas they might have gone and just watched a game together or done something else together. So it's an opportunity where we're seeing people practice the conversations. We've also seen, I've witnessed a lot of increase in vulnerability. I think it feels safer right now for people to be sharing hard things going on in their life. There's less shame around that. So we're seeing a lot more of like an in it together thing. So I'm hoping these are things that we will carry with us to the next thing. I also have seen that we've all had to kind of, it's not, we recognize that it's not more friends we need, but deeper friends. And so a lot of people, we have had to kind of prioritize and get a little bit smaller and deeper with a few people. So those are all trends that I would love to believe will go with us into the next scheme, into the next chapter, and that we will be able to practice these things in ways there, so that we are like choosing more communal experiences and really valuing that when we go into work, it's got to be so compelling. Now we could just work from home and be productive, but now the workplace needs to be so compelling that it's worth that commute to go in there and have this social interaction and to be connected. And so I'd love to see that we're actually rising to the occasion of creating these really special moments where we're getting more of our needs met, because we are all collectively articulating that hunger a little bit more. But what do you think, Chip and David? You guys could weigh in on that and give us a
What I think is
prophecy.
that, I mean, what I see in the world is that COVID is this catalyst for re-examining everything. Everything's on the table. So what am I doing? Who am I with? Where do I live? All these sort of things. People who've never exercised before, exercising much more. People suddenly stopping smoking, like just like all kinds of things are being examined. And I love what you're saying. The workplace has to become compelling, or why go there? I think that's something that's going to get looked at once things open up. But I would love to see this idea of friendship on the take, because friendship, like, it's not discussed, right? It's like it's not a thing.
Drives me crazy.
Right? It's just like the air. It's like it's just accepted. So I would love to see this friendship idea put on the table as things that are being reset, being re-examined during this, funny time that we're in. And I don't quite, I mean, I know how to do that with my community. I can just like broadcast that, but my people are small, so I can't do that on like a UN level. But I think it's a really interesting thing to just bring up in the consciousness, especially as what Chip was saying. I think what Chip was saying is so prescient, that we are a culture built on winning, and lonely is loser, and it's a problem. I don't think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing is that sometimes the loneliest people are the most successful. They're the leaders. They're the ones who look popular. There's the ones who are busy caretaking for people and loving people and giving so much to everyone, So really, when you look at the profile of a lonely person, it's not this hermit recluse that we have in our head. Like, that's a very, very small percentage. Like, most of us who are lonely are popular, loved, and very well connected, but we aren't taking the time to go deep enough and be seen by the people that matter. So we aren't getting the need met.
After social distancing comes social wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think of the word wellness, most people think of it as an individual pursuit. And yet the word illness starts with the letter I, and the word wellness starts with the letters W-E, we. And I think what we need to help people to see is that wellness is not an individualistic pursuit. And that is probably one of the main things we've learned at MEA, is how the collective wellness serves each of us individually. So Laura, and do we have one more, or is it, do we
All
need?
right, one more.
Okay.
Bob Stevens, in a few words, how do you define friendship, Shasta?
So any relationship where we both feel seen in a safe and satisfying way is my definition. And so there's a lot of relationships where we might do that for one person, but when we both are feeling seen, which means we both have to be vulnerable on some level, and it has to feel safe. And the only way it feels safe is if we do it consistently and we have that reliability there. And the only way it has to feel good, because I don't want to share and then feel judged, or I don't want to share and then have you start giving me advice, or we share because we want to be accepted and be loved and be witnessed and validated and empathize with. And so any relationship where two people routinely both feel seen in a safe and satisfying way, that is and that can be at a low level, but at the highest levels of that, the highest level of vulnerability is sharing and processing without a filter, where you're just being able to like process in real time, and it's okay if it doesn't come out right, because we're close and we're like impacting each other's process. The highest level of consistency, is like just knowing they will be there for you because they have been there for you, and like you have a commitment to each other and you show up in each other's lives and you're available and you're reliable in those situations. And the highest level of positivity is the closer we get, the more we can express that, the more I can pick out a gift that's customized for you because I know you, the more I want to go do the grand gesture and help your husband plan your birthday party and they'll fly out for this event. And so I will do more grandiose positivity in those relationships. And so there's only a few we can do all of that with, but the broadest definition is any relationship where you both feel seen in a safe and satisfying way, where you're practicing vulnerability, positivity, and consistency.
Thank you.
Laura, thank you for the questions. And I'm going to do the wrap here. So first of all, an enormous thank you to Shasta. Will you be our friend?
Well, you do know by asking that we have to be consistent, right? So
okay, I know.
I'll let you think about that and see if you
okay,
really
exactly. We didn't even get to talk about Mr. Rogers. I mean, come on, like this was like we have much more. We need to have you back. I also had wanted to talk about Arthur Aaron. Do you know who Arthur Aaron is? He's the guy. He is the guy who actually came up with the 35 questions.
Oh,
that if you ask, it leads to intimacy, and it leads to love.
Yes.
So for those of you who want to dive,
I quote him in my book because that's a great example. What they found from that study is it's vulnerability done in an incremental way, which is consistency, in a way that where they're expressing gratitude and appreciation of each other, where it's all like positivity. So it's a great example of how all three of those things are practiced. It's a great study.
Okay, perfect. And Shasta, if you want to make a donation for tonight, because as everybody knows, this is a free happy hour every 2 weeks. Shasta selected the Equal Justice Initiative, which is committed to ending mass incarceration and excessive punishment in the United States. And so you just go to eji.org to actually make a donation. And I think Laura will put that in the chat notes. Now, let me tell you who's coming 2 weeks from now. Now, first of all, they're coming an hour earlier, so we'll send out some promo on this, and it's going to start at 4 o'clock Pacific time, not 5 o'clock, which means it's a pretty big star because we've never actually moved our time slot. This is the most famous restaurateur in the United States, hands down. Wrote a famous book called Setting the Table. Has earned over 25 James Beard Foundation awards. He's in essence revolutionized the restaurant industry. He's the CEO of the company. He teaches hospitality around the world. I'm not going to say who it is. We'll be telling you soon, but show up 2 weeks from now, an hour earlier, and you get to see David and I talk to him. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Shasta, we love you. Dave.